So if you see the notice, the last notice that was posted, our final is July 30th, which is a Monday, week after next. So you have to have all your homework turned in by the time of the final, which is noon Monday. And I strongly recommend not waiting until that weekend to try to get all your work done. Okay, so we're going to step out of the PowerPoints and go back to that How to Think Like a Computer Scientist page. And the reason why is this is all Python specific, so we can swim in the language that we're actually learning rather than just looking at abstract stuff. So it's going to refer to everything as lists because that's what Python uses. And the big difference between a list and an array is that an array you allocate things to be a fixed length. And with lists, you just create a list and then you start adding stuff to it, and it'll grow as you need. So in Python, we use lists. The book discusses arrays. Python doesn't have arrays. However, you can simulate them with lists. And we've done a little of that so far. But if we were going to allocate an empty array in Python, and when I say empty array, that may be the wrong term. Here's what we have been doing. List is equal to, and then some items like that. What if you needed 10,000 places in order to store the first 10,000 digits of pi? Something like that. Or you were going to read in 1,000 names, 1,000 payroll records, or something like that. In a language where you were using arrays rather than lists. Well, you wouldn't just want to do list is equal to, and then create 10,000 different spots. That'd be really tedious. Instead, you do this. I don't think that's the correct syntax. I think that's the correct syntax. We'll try it out to make sure. This says, that's an integer, right? This says I want a list with exactly 100 spots. And they're all going to be 0. And if you put 99 in there, they'd all be filled with 99. That's similar to how you do it in other languages. Like if you're using the C programming language, you do something like this. Although in C you have to declare the type. The same is true of Java. Something like this. That's how you do it in C. In C++. It's saying that we're going to have 100 integers set to 0, so that they're all blanked out to 0. Now that's just a little comment here. Show that these concepts carry over. And then once we have 100 of them, we can access them just the way that we've been accessing them so far. We could write a loop that would fill in all 100 values. We could read them in from a file, and so on. So let's create an array and just use a for loop to fill it with all the squares. 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9. So it's going to say 1, 4, 9, and so on, the first 100 squares, just for grins. So let's pop open idle and create a file so that we can try that out. First, let me make sure that I have the correct syntax. 100 times a list of 0. Yep, that'll work. That's the correct syntax. Alright, so I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to call it today's date, July 18. So July 18.py, my name, my date, arrays and lists. As soon as I'm done with this example, I'm probably going to start talking about lists as lists rather than arrays, meaning that we're going to add items to them. they're going to magically grow in length, which is not true of arrays. But I'm going to try to make sure that we have the concept of arrays. I just want you to have them both on hand. And I'm not going to try to trick you up on an exam and ask you a question about arrays and then ding you if you use some syntax for lists or whatever. We're going to pretend that they're the exact same thing in this language. Just remember that they are fixed in length in other languages. Okay, so let's ask the user how many items they want in this list. I'm just going to call it num. And I'm going to do it in the shortest form of the input possible that does all the conversions and the printings and the input in one line. Don't let that confuse you. So I want the int version of the input version of this question, this prompt. So you see what that's doing? These are nested function calls. Here's the input function. It's going to run. It's going to ask how many items in this array. It's going to return a string. When it returns a string, that is going to be converted to an int.
You're going to float it though, right?
I could float it, but an array wants a whole number.
Gotcha.
I could take it into a float and then convert it into an int just in case they type in something dumb like 10.5, but we're going to let it crash if they type in something dumb like 10.5. Okay. So, I mean, all it would, skip it. Okay, and then our list is going to be called squares. Square nums. How about SQL? No, that's pretty bad. SQList, that's easier to type than squares in my opinion. SQList is equal to num times an empty array of length 1. That'll create a list containing, you know, if they type in 100, it'll be 100 items long. That's the nomenclature for creating an array in Python. If you did L is equal to 50 or 40 times, you know, something like that, that would create an array of 40 length of type string. So whatever this value is how long the array is, and whatever's in there is the data type. If you want it to be floats, you'd put in 0.0. If you want it to be ints, you put in 0. Now this language is nice enough that you don't have to care about whether it's ints or floats. They get converted as they need to, but other languages do not, so it's worth thinking about keeping. That's just something to keep in mind. Other languages are very particular about how they treat those data types. All right, so we have a list. Now why don't we loop filling that list up full of data? I think I'm going to start counting at 0 just because that's the way arrays work. So instead of doing 1, 4, 9, 16, you know, all those squares, I'm going to start at 0. So it's going to be 0, 1, 4, 9. That's just because I don't want to mess around with saying the square value of 1 goes in 0, and the square value of 2 goes in 1, and the square value of 3 goes into 2. You know, I don't want to play with that off by 1. So I'm just going to do the square value of 0, and then 1 squared, and 2 squared, and 3 squared, starting at element 0, 1, 2, 3. So let's make a range statement that does that. For x in range, and I need to answer your question. We're going to take a momentary diversion back to loops. But this kind of illustrates it a little bit. Like that. So if they've typed in 100 as their number, this is going to count from 0 to 99. Remember that the range is always 1 beyond your target. If you're going down, it needs to be 1 less. Like if you're trying to count down from 10 to 2, you'd put a 1 here so that it would stop at 2 as it went down. We'll give another example of that. Okay, so there we go. Let's ask the user. No, let's not even ask them. Let's just assign it. we need a value. Value is equal to x times x. And then we're going to store it in the array. SQList at position x is equal to that value, is equal to that square. I should have added a comment explaining what this bit of code is doing. Let's do that. Fill the array with the squares from 0 to num minus 1, where num minus 1 is the length of the array. Now we're going to print the array out using Python's cheating all too easy way. And if I ask you on an exam how to print an array with a loop, you're not going to do it like this. But we're just going to show how awesome Python is. You can't do this in a lot of language. You can't just say, oh, by the way, print my array, and have it magically do it. Usually you have to write a loop, which we will do. But I'm in a hurry to see this run. Well, well, well. That's not what I was expecting. Oh, wait. That's from my little demo before. That's not the actual output of the program. All right. How many items in the array? I want 5 squares. 0, 1, 4, 9, and 16. Okay, that seems to be working. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to print out that list using the 2 different kind of loops we have, the index-based loop and the value-based loop. The index-based loop, this is an index-based loop because we have an index, right? Anytime that you have something inside square brackets like that, that's an index. So use an index-based loop to print the array. That could be too. And as soon as I get this done, then I'll do walkabout and help everybody.
I think I already see the issue with mine now.
Cool. Okay, so for x in range, now remember, if you're starting at 0 and you're incrementing by 1, you can leave those 2 values out. Magically, it fills them in. So I'm going to do the short form syntax that time. For x in range num, let's print out print SQList subscript x. Now honestly, I usually use I as my counter. So I'm not sure why I switched to using x. I like I because I index, right? And then for a value-based loop, I use v for value. So I guess I'm going to go and change that x to an I, just to follow my own traditions. I'm going to scroll so that the comments are off the page, just so I can write the other loop. Use a value-based loop to print the array. This is my favorite. This is the Python way of doing it. Languages that support this are cool. Python does it, Java does it, C does not, C++ does. All right, so for v for value in SQList, you see the difference? We're not using a range. We're using the array itself. Print v, like that. Let me space it out so that we can just admire the beauty of that. If this way makes more sense, that's classical array processing. That's awesome. You know, classic arrays are accessed by their index value. This is kind of a more modern construct right there. Just depends on which way you like. If I ask you to print out an array with a loop, unless I specify that I wanted an index or a value-based loop, You're free to pick which one. Now here's what you would not want to do. If you made the value-based loop look like this, okay, I'm going to type in 2 incorrect ways of doing this. You don't have to type them in because they're incorrect. For I in range num, this is an incorrect way. Why? Because I'm just going to print out I. What's that going to print? Is it going to print the array? Do you see any reference to our SQ list array at all there? In a way I've worded that kind of makes you want to say no. But you don't. You don't see SQ list in either one of those statements. So how could it be printing the array? All it's going to print is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You know, it's just going to print the index. That's bad. Unless I just ask you to print, you know, the numbers like that one homework assignment where you're just supposed to count from 1 to 10 or something like that. In which case, sure, that's great. So that's the wrong way to do it. Another is if you try to do this. For V in SQ list, print SQ list subscript V. It'd be a miracle if that worked. The only way that would work is if SQ list is a series of numbers starting with 0 and going up by 1s. Let's just flat out say that that's the absolute wrong way of doing it. Why? Because V contains the values. What if SQ list is a series of names? You know, in that case, it's trying to print things like SQ list, quote Jeff. I can't do that. This has to be a number. So that's wrong. Both of those are dreadfully wrong. And I'll put some comments out here to the side, and I'll comment the code out. Wrong. This just prints the index. Numbers or values. The index. I'm just going to do that. Remember, the term index is synonymous with the term subscript. I'll use either one. I'm not going to try to trip you up on an exam by asking you for the difference between those two things, because really there is no difference. Okay, and this is wrong. V is a value, not an index. All right. Do you have to memorize the wrong ones? No, not as long as you memorize the correct ones. Where's my good code? I guess I scrolled it off. No, this one's correct. I don't know where my bad one went. I guess I deleted it. All right. So this is using a value-based loop to print the array. This is using an index-based loop to print the array. I'm going to move that comment out to the side just to save space on the screen. And I guess I'll go ahead and type in my bad example of the index-based loop as well. For I in range num, print I. And this is wrong, it just prints the index. So this is a great answer if I ask you to write a program that just counts. You know, I want you to count from 0 to 10. Well, great. But for I in range 10, print I. It just prints a series of numbers. It would not print the array. Alrighty. Let me run it, make sure it works, and then I'll do walkabout, make sure y'all are having a good time as well. Ha ha ha. Without looking at the error message, can you tell me what might be wrong with that statement right there? How do we access the elements in an array? That's correct right there. This is wrong right there. What's the difference between the two?
The X and
Oh yeah, the X and I.
Nope. X is fine because I made XR counter here. In fact, we could just replace all these X's with I's and we all be copacetic.
Oh, okay, it's the val.
It's these things. You see the difference? You don't use parentheses to access an array. You use square brackets. Why? What do parentheses do? Those are for function calls. Those are for module calls. I had asked that on an exam. I'm not gonna. Okay. All right, so it printed them out. There's our 5 squares from 0 to 4, There's our 5 squares. So both loops work on my screen. Let me make sure it's working for y'all as well. All right, besides the error that I made, the only other problems I saw, it's real easy to only put 1 parenthesis there. Why would you only put 1 parenthesis there? Because that's what we've done all the times in the past. But that's because we haven't been nesting functions. We just had an input, right? And an input on a line by itself, great, 1 parenthesis. But we had 2 functions here, so we had 2 opening parentheses, so we have to have 2 closing parentheses. If you had something other than a multiply, like you didn't have that at all, or you had a plus sign, that wouldn't work. We need the times there to, like if num is equal to 5, we want to create 5 spaces, 5 times a space. Go back to your shell, do run Python shell, and just type 5 times quote hello. There we go. Hello, 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 hello. Sounds like a Nirvana song. All right, do 5 times square bracket, quote hello, end quote, close bracket. All right, so that created an array. How can you tell? Well, this is just a string. And by the way, Python doesn't consider any difference between single quotes and double quotes. Other languages care very much about single quotes versus double quotes. If you go and take C, C#, C++, Java, any of those languages, you use a single quote if you're referring to a single letter, like that. You use double quotes if you're referring to a string, which is more than 1 letter. Just keep that tucked away in your brain. Okay, so 5 times a word, that's kind of funny, right? Other languages don't do this. You know, normally you're just multiplying numbers. But if you do 5 times a string, it concatenates that string to itself 5 times. And if you do 5 times an array element, it creates a list of that length. And that's good news because, yeah, it would be pretty easy to do list is equal to square brace, 1, 2, 3, 5 times. But if it was 1,000 items, you wouldn't want to do that. So you just do 1,000 times subscript 0, something like that, and then you get your array of 1,000 items. Lickety split. All right, we need to. Did we actually do code with parallel arrays, or did I just demonstrate them? I guess if I popped open the notes, I would know for sure, or popped open one of y'all's assignments. Several of y'all type in absolutely everything I do, so that's cool. But I'm going to grab Josiah's.
Hi, special.
I don't see our double lists there. Well, we're going to do it anyways, whether we did or not. It's worth talking about. What's a parallel list? What are parallel arrays? 2 or more arrays, multiple arrays of the same length, where the data is conceptually linked, and the textbook used a slightly different word, conceptually linked by their index number. That's important enough that I'm going to type it down. Parallel arrays, 2 or more arrays of the same length, because they're not parallel if one is 5 and then one is 10, where the elements are conceptually linked. You can leave off the word conceptually by the index number, by the subscript. So for example, you had 3 kids. So K is equal to, why don't we actually type this in the code? And then we're going to list their favorite foods. Okay, so this is an example of parallel arrays. We want 3 kids. I'm just going to call it K. Single letter variable names. Really lame. All right, is equal to, and we have 3 kids. We have Aiden, Brandon, and Karen. And their favorite foods. Pizza, ice cream, and cake. And get rid of that backslash. Now let's put their favorite color. C. Aiden likes red. Brandon likes green. And Karen is extremely odd and likes ultraviolet. It's not fair that bees can see ultraviolet light and we can't. How dare they? Okay. If you've played some versions of like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathways or whatever, you know, you have some people with infravision who can see heat, and you have some other people with ultravision who can see ultraviolet light. All right, so if we print out K subscript 0, comma, F subscript 0, comma, C subscript 0, it's going to print out Aiden pizza red. Just copy that line and replace them with 1 and 2. 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1. And I bet you could already see that we could replace these prints with a loop. Anytime you see series of numbers like that, 0, 1, and 2, or anytime you're copying and pasting like that, you probably could make it a loop. Why would we make it a loop? What if we had 10 kids, you know, and 10 foods and 10 colors? Alright, there we go. Aiden with his pizza red, Brandon with his ice cream green, and Karen with her cake ultraviolet. Alright, so for homework, I have a question about parallel arrays. Yeah, sorry. Let's pop that back up. Okay. So those are parallel arrays. They're all of the same length, and they're united by their index number. First element of every array is 0. Aiden likes his pizza red. Brandon likes his ice cream green. Karen likes her cake ultraviolet. And we could do another kind of parallel array, like names and test scores and student IDs, or class names and class numbers, right? You know, 1113 is fundamentals and 1613 is Java, or whatever. Anything where you have 2 lists, just like on a spreadsheet, you have 2 columns of the same length where the items are, you know, linked. January's sales, February's sales, March's sales, the temperature on Monday, the temperature on Tuesday, the temperature on Wednesday, all that kind of stuff. That might be worth doing just so that we can use a loop to process this stuff. Why don't we print out a temperature for 7 weeks? I mean, for 7 days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 70. So I'm going to do TMP for temperatures is equal to, why didn't I do the days first? Days is equal to, it's too bad Tuesday and Thursday have both the same starting letter. Otherwise you can't just use one letter. Mon, end quote, comma, 2, end quote, comma, Wednesday, end quote, comma, Thursday, and I'm going to stop there just to save some typing time. We ought to flesh it out with Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right? And then temperatures, TEMP. think I'm going to make it TMPS just so that it's plural the whole way through for this example. Alrighty. Monday it was 60. Tuesday it was 80. Wednesday it was 75. Thursday global warming kicked in and it was 105. Absolutely not going political here, but maybe if you grew up in the 70s and 80s, you remember like Carl Sagan always talking about global cooling. So it seems to me like if the planet gets too hot, just a small nuclear war would cool it off enough to... All right, anyways. Okay, so let's make a loop that'll print it out. What are we going to have to count from? What are our possible index numbers for the days array? They start at 0, right? And then what's the maximum number going to be?
Should be 3, right?
Right, so we just make a loop that goes from 0 to 3. Better yet, we ought to use the length of the array. But for now, I'm just going to code it with the 3. So for I is really my favorite index counter, rather than x. In range 3. I'm leaving off the 0 and the step because if you start at 0 and the step is 1, you can leave those two numbers off. And this is a shorter. But if you're feeling like the 0 comma and the 1 comma after it, you like being verbose rather than terse, totally cool. Both are cool. Alright, I could use the dot format syntax, or I could just put one long print statement separated by commas. That's what I'm going to do. Why get fancy? Print days subscript 0, comma, quote, it was, end quote, comma, temps subscript I, comma, quote, degrees. F. In parentheses. Okay, so that's going to print out Monday it was 60 degrees, Tuesday it was 80, Wednesday it was 75, Thursday it was 105. Nuclear winter, that was a term he called it.
I remember hearing that.
Yeah. Of course, if you're having a nuclear war big enough to cause nuclear winter, I think there are other problems as well.
Yeah.
like
fish with sunrise or something.
Like big craters where every Air Force base and large city was. But okay. So I'm going to run it, then I'll do another walkabout.
I just want to mow the grass without melting.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do.
Alright, so how many items? This gets tedious having to answer it. Monday it was 60 degrees. Tuesday it was 80. Wednesday it was 75, and it seems like I made a mistake. Oh, silly mistake. Earn some big brownie points for spotting what I did wrong. If we want to count 0, 1, 2, 3, what should the range actually be?
4.
4. Yep, thank y'all. And if I'd use the len function to get the length of the array, then that mistake wouldn't have been possible. All right. There we go. Monday through Thursday, 60, 80, 75, 105. So it's not really a good idea to use a magic number like that, 4, because we might stretch it out to 7 days. So instead of putting it at 4, I'm going to put len parentheses and then the name of one of the arrays. Doesn't matter which one because they're the same length by definition. And then I couldn't have made that mistake with the 3. Alrighty. Now, if we were really cool, we'd write a loop asking for the temperatures rather than hard coding the temperatures. Maybe we'll do that. Then we're going to make the program more annoying, right? Because we have to answer more questions every single time we run it. But anybody need typo assistance before we blaze boldly forth? All right, so now we're going to do the same thing, except we're not going to hard code the temperatures to 60, 80, 75, 105, because how often will those be the truth? That's like winning the lottery, right? You know, a series of numbers that actually happen to match. So now we're going to write an input loop to fill a parallel array. This one's going to be easy because we're going to ask input to only fill the temperatures. But if you were doing like test scores, you might ask for the name of the student and their test. All right. We wouldn't have to redeclare this array, but I want it to be separate. I want them to, you know, look accurate even if you weren't looking up here at this code. So I'm just going to copy that days array and paste it, which is silly in terms of having just one piece of code, but, you know, if I copied this example and pasted it, you know, in a separate document, I'd want to see that. And now I want to declare an array that's 4 long, but doesn't have any data in it. And that's like what we were doing at the beginning. And what's the syntax for that? TMPS, that's the name of our array, is equal to, and then how have we allocated our array when we weren't filling it with data?
Parentheses? No.
We would use a brace, but we did the multiplication symbol, right? Way up here. That's how we created an array. So we have 4 days, and again I'm going to use 4, but then I'm going to fix it to be the right thing. 4 times square brace 0 because we're filling it with numbers. I like putting spaces to make things nice. But again, that 4 is lame. We're going to probably want to replace it with length days. But for now, I'm going to leave it like that and then make the fixes. It's a good idea to write the code first and then make the improvements, rather than get stuck on trying to make the improvements as you write it. Because if you get working code, you can make fixes to it. But if you write and write and write, you should always try to keep your program at some functional state where it'll always compile and run, even if it doesn't do anything to begin with. Because then you can keep adding on to it. It's called the snowball approach, right? You start with a little snowball of code, and then you keep pushing it, adding code to it. Alrighty, this is just going to be another for loop. And by the way, if you're working with parallel arrays, you always have to use an index-based for loop. Take that on faith rather than me sitting there babbling for 5 minutes about why. So for I in range, what should I make the rest of this statement? It's really ought to be exactly the same as the prior one. So range what?
LEN days.
Yep, LEN days. Either array would actually work, but days sounds great to me. Now we're going to print the question. What was the temperature on Monday? Or what was the temperature on Tuesday? What was the temperature on Wednesday? So print, what was the temperature on, end quote, comma, and I want to reference the days array, and then I want to specify which day. So what's the syntax for doing that? I'm going to use the name of the array followed by what?
Brackets.
Yep, and then followed by?
I.
Yep, exactly. Good deal. And then we need an input statement. We need to convert it to an int or a float, and we need to put it into the array.
Can't you just change the print out, just put input and have it do the same thing? See what I mean?
Yeah, but no. You could make that work if you went to some trouble. But if we did this, Guys, don't make this change because I'm going to immediately undo it. The input statement doesn't know what to do with multiple parameters, with commas and stuff like that. We would have to build the string to begin with and then input out that string. So it's just easier to use a print first. Good thinking. That's how I would do it if I didn't have multiple things to print, meaning this string followed by the date. And the reason I like using the input with the string inside it, and again, don't type this, is because it puts the cursor on the same line, right? But if I do a print and then an input, it puts the question on one line and then it puts the cursor on the next line. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so we need an input. Let's get our temperature. I better not use TMPS because that would erase what was already in our array. I'm not going to use TEMP because that looks too much like temps. A lot of people would. Whoopsie, or use TMP. But once you start mixing singles and plurals to try to differentiate the two, then you're surely going to make typos. At least I would. So I'm going to use value. I could use a single letter like X or something like that. Value is equal to input. Now I need to convert it to a float. Value is equal to float, parentheses. Why would I use float rather than int? What if our thermometer is real accurate? 92.5 degrees. If you typed in 0.5 in your input and then tried to convert it to an int, it would crash.
Yeah.
So, all right, now we have our value and we can store it back into the array. So to copy something into an array, you put the array name on the left side, and then you put the value you're copying into it on the right. And by the way, you always do that. Whenever you have a single equal sign, you always put the variable name on the left and what you're copying into it on the right. If I did float is equal to value, that would crash because the function is on the left and the variable's on the right. And hey guys, text me with questions. Only a couple of y'all are texting me with questions. And those tend to be the people who are keeping up on the homework. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength to be brave enough to text me. You know, the people who are texting me hopefully would attest to the fact that you get good responses. Get your homework done quickly. Alrighty, so the name of my array is what? The one that I actually want to store the temperatures into. It's not days, those aren't our temperatures.
Temps.
Yeah, TMPS. And I need to specify which temperature. So what am I going to do to specify which element?
F? No. I.
Yeah, temps subscript I is equal to that value that was just typed in. A lot of programmers would combine these two statements. I'm going to undo it, but what they... Oh, that's dumb. I made a serious error there. I'm being real sloppy today. What did I do wrong on that statement?
You didn't put in value.
Yeah, the float of what, right? It's supposed to magically know? No. Float of value. Make sure you fix that line, guys. And what I mean is that we could have just done this. I'm going to erase it, so don't type it. Float of value there, right? And then I could have skipped this sign, skipped this line. And let's undo that.
Thank you.
Alrighty, that's good enough. Now we just need to print it out. What would be the fastest way of printing it out? It'd be to steal those 2 lines of code that we used to print out the array just up here. That's faster. But I'm going to use a formatted print statement just for the practice. So print placeholder, which is 2 curly braces, I believe. I was getting that wrong last time. It was placeholder degrees F. End quote, and remember, if you're using format, you don't put commas, you use dot format. Dot format. parentheses and the list of the things we're printing, and then 2 closed parentheses. Now I haven't filled in what we're printing, but it's just going to be the same thing we were printing up here. Day subscript I and TMPS subscript I. Days subscript I, comma, TMPS subscript I. You'll see examples of code, and I may have done it, where instead of the placeholder you put %. %D for a number. So it'd be %D, it was %D degrees F. But this is the newer fangled way of doing this. When I say newer fangled, it's the Python 3 way rather than the Python 2 way. All right, it's plausible that's going to work. I'm going to run it. I'm going to have to enter some temperatures. It's more typing. Alrighty, how many items in the array? 1. What was the temperature on Monday? It was 100. On Tuesday it was 101. Wednesday it was 102. Thursday it was 109. Now something went wrong.
Mine definitely went wrong.
Oh, this is dumb. I don't want it to print out the temperature as they enter it. So I don't want it inside that loop. Right? Because now what is it doing? It's asking for the input and it's immediately displaying it. Nah, we want that in a loop. My mistake. So I need to put one more for loop. It's just going to be the same for loop as this. I could just copy that line and paste it. Or I in range, parentheses, len, parentheses, days, and then 2 closed parentheses and a colon. Then run it, F5, 1 item in the array. What was the temperature on Monday? It was 100, 101, 2, 104, 106. All right, and then it prints it out. Monday was 100, Tuesday was 102, Wednesday was 104, Thursday was 106. Now we could make this look more like a report, you know, by putting headers and just putting the numbers out and the days, you know, make it look like an Excel report, but we're not going to bother. All right, we have played with parallel arrays a lot. The next step, if we were going to keep pushing the topic, would be to make it where you did 2 inputs, like a student name followed by their test score. Or 3 inputs, student first name, student last name, and a test score. Or 4 inputs, student name, student whatever, you know, ID, whatever. So, you know, you could make as many parallel arrays as you wanted to, and you could ask as many inputs as you needed to fill in each element. All right, pause. All right, I don't want to do the multiple inputs per line, you know, where we type in somebody's name and their test score, or first name and last name. You've got the idea. You would just add additional input statements right here inside the for loop. So I'm going to blip over to the Python specific stuff, which means I want to go to that How to Think Like a Computer Scientist page, which means I'm going to come over here to Contents, click Online Reference, How to Think Like a Computer Scientist. It would be amazingly good for you as a programmer to just start reading this from chapter 1 all the way to the end, because they cover a lot more stuff than we do because they have the luxury of focusing on a specific language. All right, so lists. Chapter 11. So what is a list? It's an ordered collection of values. The values that make up a list are called elements. We will use the term element or item to mean the same thing. Lists are similar to strings, except strings are collections of letters. characters. But the elements of a list can be of any type. Lists and strings in any other collection are called sequences. It's just a sequence of values. I'm not going to use that term. So here's a declaration of a list. I guess we're minding our P's and our Q's because P's are equal to 10, 20, 30, 40, and Q's are equal to spam, bungee, and swallow. And if you're a Monty Python fan, you'll probably recognize the name of skits, although I don't remember one over bungees. Okay. Now, lists are different than arrays in that they can be of different data types, at least in this language. You could have a string followed by a floating point number, followed by an int, followed by even another list, which is kind of crazy. And we're going to leave that alone. A list within another list is said to be nested. Or you can make an empty list. Where we're going to be doing this. That's just where you use variable name equals square brackets with nothing in it. Square brackets, square braces. So like L equals brace brace. That's an empty list. Why in the world would you create an empty list? Because, as I've mentioned, lists, unlike arrays, have add or append functions where you can just start adding things to it. You start off with an empty list, and that's just like, a piece of notebook paper. You're going to make your shopping list. Starts off empty. You don't go and and create 10 underlines and then start filling in 10 shopping items. Instead, you start with an empty piece of notebook paper and you just start adding lines to it. And that's what we're going to be doing. All right, here's more examples. Vocab, apple, cheese, dog. Numbers, and empty list. That's our new baby there. So accessing elements. We're one up on these guys. We know how to do it already. You put your subscript, your index, between the square braces. And if you make a mistake like I did and put parentheses there, it fails, because then it thinks that numbers is a function, and it's not a function. If you created a function called numbers and then you created an array called numbers, Python throws a fit. Other languages that generate a syntax error as soon as you try to do that, but Python goes ahead and says, oh, I guess you don't need that numbers module anymore. I'm just going to replace it with an array. The index, the subscript, has to be a whole number. So can't type in numbers 1.6. That wouldn't make any sense. But you can use an expression. 9 minus 8, that would just make an array, or that would make, a subscript of 1, because 9 minus 8 is 1. But it can't be a fractional number. It can't be a floating point number. If you try to access something that's out of range, like if your list is 3 items long and you try to access element number 10, we get an error. In a great many languages, but a few languages will go ahead and do it and just give you junk. Like in C or C++, if you make an array that's 12 items long and then you ask for item number 13, it goes ahead and returns without giving you a syntax error. Whatever happened to be stored in those bytes after the first 12 elements, which you can't predict, would be returned. And then you'd have a silent error. You wouldn't know that it was going wrong until something blew up, until your calculations were wrong or you got corrupted data. But fortunately, Python and Java and C# and a lot of other languages catch mistakes like that. It is common to use a loop variable as an index. Now, we've been using a range statement, but you could do this as well. For I, n, and then give a list, 0, 1, 2, 3. That's a mixture of the range-based, the index-based, and the value-based. And I'm not going to look at that too long because that's pretty weird. But instead of saying for I in range 4, they're doing for I in range, and then they're giving a list, and the list just happens to be 0, 1, 2, 3. Now, is that a good way of doing it? I don't think so, because that depends on us knowing exactly how long the horseman list is. If the horseman list, we're filming, Lord of the Rings with 10,000 horsemen running towards us, we'd have to have a list of 10,000 numbers there. That'd be silly. Here is the value-based for loop. We've declared our horseman, and we're going to print it out without using indexes. For value in horseman, print that value. Except they didn't call it V or value. They call the variable age, but variable names don't mean anything. They mean something to us, they don't mean anything to the computer. We could do for Spider-Man and Horseman print Spider-Man. Would work just as well. Now say we want the length of the list, we use the len built-in function. This is the good way to do it. For I in range, if you're going to use an index-based loop, which we are, right? We see the subscript there. For I in range, len list name. Now you don't put braces after Horseman. We didn't when we were talking about days or temps, because we just want the length of the whole array, the whole list, not one element in the list. Now we're talking about lists within lists. We're skipping that. List membership. This is something brand new. I'm going to give you an example of that in the shell first before we actually do any code. Say we have a list that looks like this. Jenny's phone number is equal to 8675309. You classic rock fans. Okay. Now let's say that we want to find out if a specific number is in it. Is 0 in that list? 0 in J. Sure is. So you would do if 0 in J colon print yay. Whatever you're going to do with it.
It's a capital J.
And I made a capital J. It would have worked. And in this case, it would have printed yay. What if I use a number that's not in the list?
Should just say false, right?
Right, it's going to say false. So 1 in J, there's no 1 in her phone number, and there I went with my capital letter again. False. So if I did for 1 in J, lowercase, print, oh no.
Oh no.
Not 4. What did I do here? I used an if statement. 4s are for loops. This is for logic. If 1, oh come on. Why are you not letting me type down here? Okay, forget it. If 1 in J colon print, oh no. But 1 was not in J, so it didn't print anything. If you wanted to check for its absence, you could do that. If not 1 in J colon print parentheses quote not found into parentheses whatever, and it wasn't found because 1 was not found in J. And this is Python specific syntax. Some languages would let you use an exclamation point there to mean not, just like you say not equals an exclamation point equal. Not in this language, you use the word not, but same idea. So the in syntax. Now I need to copy some of this stuff into our notes. List functions. len L, standing for capital list, returns the length of list L. So if that's our phone number, and then we do x is equal to len parentheses j, what's x going to equal? Well, how long is our phone number?
7 numbers.
7 numbers, so that it would be 7. And then the in keyword. What do they call it? I'm sure they came up with a better computer science term than what I was just about to type. List membership. Alrighty. Checks to see if a value is a member of the list. Not digging the term member. How about saying element? So x, if x in y colon checks to see if, I'm going to use a capital L there instead of a y. If x in L checks to see if x is an element in list L. So if 8 in our list J colon, lowercase j, can I type today? Let's put a colon there. Print found 8. That would print true, or that would print found 8. If 1 in J colon, we've already established there's no 1 in it, print found 1, or print yes, else colon, print no. What's it going to print?
It's going to print no.
Right, because it's not a member of the list, not an element inside the list. That's very useful. If we have parallel lists and we have a series of student names, you might want to look up that student in order to modify a test score or their student ID or whatever. You'd want to check to see if that student was in the list. So you'd ask for the name and then you'd check if name in list of names. And if it was, you could do something with that information. If not, you're going to tell them, nope, you did not type in a valid name. Now, asking for a name is kind of dumb. You'd probably ask for a student ID number, but, you know, whatever. Let's go back to this. Nah, skipping that one because it has lists embedded in lists. No thanks. But read this chapter of the, read all the chapters in this thing. You can kind of eyeball, if you're looking at it, what we have covered and what not. Functions, absolutely worth reading. We've been talking about modules, absolutely worth reading chapter 4. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make a list of chapters I'd like for you to read. Not that I'm going to grade you on that, but read chapters 4, conditionals, fruitful function, iteration, and strings, and lists. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8, and 11. Oh, and modules, 12. Okay, 5 through 8, 11, and 12. Now that's a lot of reading, but actually these are pretty short chapters. 4 through 8, and then 11 and 12. You don't have to get that done like by tonight, you know. But heck, we got a weekend coming up. You don't have anything better to do, except your homework. All right, so back to lists. List operations. We've done list membership. Is debauchery in the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? No. But pestilence was. There's another one. You can add lists together with a plus sign. Here's list A. A is equal to 1, 2, 3. Here's list B. 4, 5, 6. List C is equal to A plus B. And then print out C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you just use the plus sign. When do you use a multiplication sign? When you want to make an array of a certain length. 100 times, you know, and then an element would make 100 of those elements. But you use addition to add them. So you use the star operator to repeat that item. They change the order. Right? Element times the number. I like putting the number first, but whatever. This means the same thing. I want 4 zeros in my list. 0, 0, 0, 0. Now this one's a bit crazy because they actually made a list and then they multiplied it by 3. They made a list that had 1, 2, 3 and they multiplied it by 3, so it made a list that contained 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I tend not to do that. I just like to declare an array of a certain length. List slices. Now we're getting to the really, really, really good stuff. I really want this to be burned into your brain, and it's important enough to me that we're going to talk about it again on Monday. What is a slice? It works the same way in strings, so let's play with it in strings. Now create a new file, or at least tack this on at the top so we don't have to keep answering all those questions. I'm going to go up to the very top and do slices. That's what I'm going to call it. We're first going to do string slices. So I'm going to make a sentence. I'm just going to call it S. S is equal to Darth Vader is the hero of the story. Now say I only wanted to print out a certain subsection of this. say I was curious about what items 10 through 20 were, or 10 through 19. Well, if I start counting, that's index 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it would start with that. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So if I tell it to print out elements 10 through 19, which I'm going to specify by saying 10 through 20, just like the range statement, then it would print out that. That's called taking a slice, right? Other languages call it a substring. That would be a substring of string S. Let's do that. Print S square brace, so it starts looking like a subscript. And it kind of is, but we're going to start it at 10, and we're going to go up to but not including letter 20. And just for fun, we're going to do a few more. Print S subscript starting at 0 and going out, I don't know, 5 characters. Now before running that, can somebody tell me what that is? This one is going to print. Well, which letter is position 0?
D.
D, right. And so just like a range statement, what's the upper number going to be? One less than the one specified. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we expect to see the word Darth cough up there. Now I'm just going to add an input, press enter to continue so that we can kind of stop the program at that point.
We didn't already stop at how many items in this array?
Right, but just conceptually I want to stop it there. You can leave that out. Alrighty. So R is the age. It'd make more sense if we printed out, the string first. So I think I'm going to add that. The very first print statement is going to be the whole thing. Print S. Just so we can see what we're hooking up with. Well, I don't know why I did that. But anyways, there we go. Darth Vader's the hero of the story. R is the age. That's starting at the 10th character and going out to the 19th character because I said 10:20. And this prints out Darth because I said 0:5, and so it gets out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Important stuff. Why? Well, if you're processing a list, you may want the first 4 items of the list. You may want the last 7 items of the list. Something like that. Now there's some special syntaxes that we can use that are specific to Python. Now just like the range statement, what happens if you leave the first number out of the range statement? It automatically starts at 0. Like if you do range 4, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. Well, you can leave off that 0 and it'll do the same thing. So S, but you have to put the colon, oddly enough. And when I say oddly enough, I'll demonstrate why in a second. I'm going to take that colon out. That looks funny. Okay, so print S:5. F subscript :5. Now, did we actually save a whole bunch of typing by doing that? No, we could just add a 0 there. Wow. But we'll see a more important application of leaving the colon off. Leaving a value off in just a second. Why did we have to put a colon there in the first place? Because what would it print if I just did that?
It'd print out the age.
Yeah, I'd print out 1 letter. I don't want the 1 letter. I want the whole slice. So I'm going to go ahead and put my colon there. But I'm going to add a comment. This starts at 0. Now, if you leave off the second number, it means something special. It means go all the way to the 10th spot. Not the 10th spot. It goes all the way to the end of the string. Just like if you leave off the number before the colon, it starts at the beginning of the string. If you leave off the second number, it goes to the end of the string. So I'm going to print S, and I'm going to start at character 5, but I want it to go to the end of the string. Now, why would I do that? Because I may not really know what the length of the string is, and I don't want to use len in order to determine the length of the string and mess with it like that. Yeah, we could, but this is a nice clean syntax. So printing out characters 0 through 4 gets us Darth. Printing out 5 colon gets us Vader as the hero of the story. Unless you get an error. What did I do wrong on that line?
You didn't put the S.
Yeah, why don't I put the S there? Then I'll feel good about myself. Alright. Alright, so it printed out Darth, and then it printed out Vader as the hero of the story. And it just happened that there was a space after the word Darth. It's not that there's any specific reason for there to be a space based on what we printed out. Like if we printed out :3, it would print out the first 3 characters, and then if we did 3 : it would print all the rest. There wouldn't be a space in front. So that one starts at 0. This goes to the end. That one really is useful. This one kind of meh. That's a big meh because it doesn't take that much time to type in a 0 : but it takes a little bit of thinking to figure out how we would go to the end otherwise. It's not traumatic. We could probably just do length of S, but that's ugly syntax, right? It looks nasty, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to copy and paste this into our notes, even though I put this in our, I usually append the code as well. Slices, also known as substrings. Now when you're talking about arrays, it's not a substring. I guess you could call it a subarray. But they just call it a list. Excuse me, a slice. I better do a save just in case the computer crashes while we're playing with all of our good stuff. And this isn't chapter 5, this is lists from online textbook. I guess they're both online, but different from Mindtown. List from chapter 11 online textbook. Alrighty, anybody getting typos? Or can we blaze onward? Yes, sir. You may come eyeball it? Alrighty.
Yeah, something wrong with the input.
I can send you a link to where to download NetBeans.
Actually, I already found it. That's
Oh,
fine.
alright, cool.
Should have went ahead and put this.
So that's 2 keywords, or 2 concepts. We've already seen length, so the length of L, and then we've seen N, X and L, and now we're seeing slices, L, colon, X, colon Y, something like that. We know what len does. I'm not going to even write what it does. Okay, fine, I will. Returns length of the list, or the string. Lists and strings are so similar in many ways that I could put an S there to mean strength, and it would mean this to mean string, and it would do the same thing. Now this one I can't say that it would do that. We could try that. We could check to see if Darth is in that string. Somebody do that. If Darth in S. See if it prints out true or false or something like that. Anyways, okay. Checks to see if X is in L. And then slices starting at X and ending one before L, or one before Y. Now, before I open the page again, can you think of another useful function besides just finding out if something is in the list? What might be useful? We already know how to get the length of it. We already know how to take a slice of it. We already know how to get the index number so that we can change an element. But what if we do if 8 in Jenny's phone number, but then we want to change that to a 9? What do we need to know? We don't want to just know true or false that it's in the list. What else do you need to know in order to change that 8 to a 9?
Location.
You need to know the location, so you have to search it to find its location. And yeah, you could write a loop to search it. It's way more awesome to be given a function. Now, honestly, I don't remember the name of the function because it's different in every language I teach, but I'm absolutely sure that the page is going to tell us.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
You know how you said see if Dart is an S? You gave me syntax there.
All right, it may not work. Let me go look. So when I suggested that if Darth and S, let's go see if quote Darth
That might be why.
lowercase d n s colon fine print yes Lord Vader, else print Darth not found. Not an error message you usually see. All right, so it did work. The in function works for strings as well as lists, which is to be expected mostly because lists and strings are so similar. Because a string is just a series of characters, a sequence of characters, as that page is telling us. Whereas a list is just a sequence of elements. There'll be a few places where we see some differences. And one is that although I started talking about changing Jenny's phone number, or if I wanted to change this to a capital D, it would be nice if I could do this. This is going to be a syntax error, so I'm going to wind up commenting it. Say I don't like the fact that that's a lowercase d and I want to make it uppercase. That would be neat. That doesn't work. If it was a list where, we had commas, between every letter, sure, that would work. This is not going to work, and it's going to give us an error, maybe using the word immutable. Okay, it's not going to use the term immutable. String object does not support item assignment, meaning you cannot change the elements of it. That's because this, and in some other languages, strings are, quote, immutable, meaning that they cannot be changed. You can reassign it. You could say S is equal to, Luke Skywalker is the bad guy. This is all from me. Silly. You could do that without a syntax error, but you can't change individual components, individual pieces of the string. That's the one big difference between a string and a list. Lists are certainly not immutable. Strings are. And what does mutable mean? Changeable, right? Mutation. Mutation means changing. If something is immutable, you can't change it. You can't mutate it. Okay, so this is an error. I'm going to just comment it out and then put the reason why. Strings are immutable. Can't be changed. Doesn't mean, okay, now when it says can't be changed, I should come up with a better word for that, because you could add a string to it. You could say S plus, Y, and it would add Y onto S. Totally cool. I'm just going to leave it as strings are immutable. You know what that means. I don't need to give a further description of it. I hope. Just accept it. You can't change the individual elements of a string. I guess that's a good way to word it. Immutable means you can't change the individual elements. Lists are mutable. Strings are not. Okay, and I just added the word error to that explanation. I guess I'll put that on its own line. Some of y'all type all the notes. Totally okay if you don't, because I upload them. Alrighty, where were we? We were talking about searching. Searching a list for a specific element. And there's also a way of changing. Like if I have something all separated with commas, 8675309, and I feel like changing all the 3's in that to a 4, I could do that. I could change every element that matches something to a different value. Not going to work with strings because strings are immutable. Alrighty, so lists are mutable. Unlike strings, lists are mutable, meaning we can change their elements. Using the index operator, you can reassign it. So here I have a list that says banana, apple, and quince. Now, honestly, I don't even know what that fruit is. But if we want to change banana to pear, we would say fruit subscript 0 is equal to pear. That would change banana to pear. If we say fruit subscript 2, that's going to change quince to orange. Then when you print it out, it's going to print pear, apple, orange. Here we have my list, which equals the elements are the letters of the word test. We want to change this S to an X. So what element is that? Element 2. So we say my list subscript 2 is equal to X. And then when we print it out, we get TEXT. Now this is wild. I've never really played with this, but this works. You can update a whole sublist at once. Notice they're using the term sublist, and I was saying substring. Well, this is a list. It's not a string. So here they say, I want to change elements. Here's a question that I didn't really hammer in on, so it's going to be a think problem. When I say 1:3, how many items is that? How many elements is that?
That's 3.
We would think 3. But which one is element 1? That's element 1. And then what's the next element? That's element 2. And when we specify 1 to 3, it means starting at 1 and stopping before 3. So it's 2. Fortunately, there's a quick way to eyeball it. Take that number, subtract that 1, and you get 2. That's honestly an easier way for me to think about it. If I said I want elements 3 through 6, that just means start at 3 and then grab how many elements? Well, what's 6 minus 3? 3. So 0, 1, 2, 3, get 3 elements. If you say 1:4, how many elements is that going to be?
That'd be 3.
Right. So starting at element 1 and then going 3. 1, 2, and 3. And so they're saying replace elements 1:3, which is the B and the C, with X and Y. Yeah, that works. You can remove elements from a list by assigning an empty list to them. If you say 1:3 is equal to empty list, that just winds up deleting B and C. That's a weird concept, and I don't do that, but you certainly can. Or you can insert items by appending them by squeezing them into an empty list, empty slice at the end. Whoopsie. Or squeezing them into a slice at the desired location. Now, if you say 1:1, how many items is it going to retrieve?
None.
None. So it's saying starting at position 1, but not getting anything. Set that equal to BC. So that's going to be A, and then BC, D, F. List deletion. You can delete items using the DEL keyword. Seems to me like you could also delete it using that this nomenclature.
Right.
saying a list 4:5 is equal to empty list, that might delete it, but you have a nice keyword for doing it. del space a subscript 1, well, it goes and finds item 1 and just removes it, deletes it. That's actually worth making sure that we type, that we put in our code so that we can burn it in. I'm going to go back to code. Let's make a little list. C, lowercase c, is equal to our favorite colors: red, green, blue, yellow, orange, silver. All right. Let's say I really hate OU and want to get rid of the color red. What's the index number of the color red? 0. Delete C subscript 0. Now if we print C out, and I'm going to print it just the whole shebang with read it and write a loop to do it, it's going to print green, blue, yellow, orange, silver. I'm going to add a comment, although it's pretty obvious. Deletes element 0. Now what if you don't want to delete it by its index position? You just want to do delete red, right? You don't know the index number. There's a way to do that too. I'm sure that we'll see that very soon on the page. I guess I should run it, make sure that that actually works. All right, so red is now gone from the list of colors. I'm going to copy and paste that into the notes. Maybe I'll copy the whole thing. So that's a new list function. I'm going to come up here and add that onto my notes under the category list functions. del L subscript X deletes element at index X. So is the del function going to work with strings? Could we delete the D from the string? I really doubt it. And why do I say that? Were we allowed to change that lowercase d to an uppercase D? Like that? Did that work or not?
No.
The very next line, the very next comment says that it's an error. The reason why is that strings are immutable. I doubt that we could delete a specific element from that S string. Yeah, let's find out. Experimentation. So, del S, that was the name of our string. Subscript 0. I'm going to wind up removing that line of code. Boom. The string object doesn't support item deletion. Yeah, it's immutable. Can't delete from it. All right, so bye-bye. I am skipping that concept. Aliasing. If you do this, A is equal to 1, 2, 3. B equals A. Do we now have two lists? No, we really only have one list. It's not that B becomes a copy, has a copy of A in it. B is A. It's like you have one home on the street. You have an address to it. You write that on a piece of paper, and then you write the same address down on another piece of paper. That doesn't suddenly give you two homes. You still only have one home. You only have one object. You only have one list. And if you do B is equal to A, that does not copy it. It just points both so-called references to the same object. So both variables wind up being the same list, not a copy. You can make a copy of it, though. I guess I'll put this in our text, in our notes.
So like if one car had a VIN number.
Yeah, if the VIN number is the same, even though you have several copies of that VIN number, it's all pointing to the same car.
Certain model car, VIN number, but another car, same car, a different VIN number. Same.
Well, you couldn't do that. I mean, I don't know if a car can have multiple VIN numbers. I don't think so. Right. So that doesn't work. Yeah. So instead, it's you have the same VIN number written down in several places, so they're all referring to the same car. So let's do that. A is equal to something 1, 2, 3. B is equal to A. B is not a copy of the list. B is the list. So any changes you make to A would also be reflected in B. So if I did this, delete A subscript 0 to remove the first element, and then I printed B, it would print 2, 3. If you actually want to make a copy of the list, you can do so. To make a copy of the list, you use a slice. What kind of slice is it going to be? It's going to be starting at the beginning and going all the way to the end. There's a easy but weird syntax for that. A is equal to B subscript. Don't put anything at the beginning, so what position is that going to start at? If you don't put a number before the colon, what index is specified there?
Start with 0.
Yeah, I could even put a 0 if I wanted to. And then don't put a number after the colon. What does that mean?
It's going to go
all the way to the end. So starting at the first one, going all the way to the end, get those elements and stuff them in A. I'm not going to ask you that on an exam. But I do want you to tuck away in your brain the idea that if you have two references to an object, we haven't really used the word object much. Our turtles have been the best objects that we've been using. But a list is also an object. What is an object? It's the opposite of a primitive data value. A primitive data value is just a number, 1, 2, 3, or string. The word Darth, something like that. Those are primitive values. But an object is more complex. Obviously, lists are more complex. So are turtles. You can make your own objects. You might make a patient object. And what is a patient? A patient's got a patient ID and a first name and a last name. Maybe they have a social security number and a birth date and the last height and weight that they had, all that kind of stuff.
So we've been making pretty simple programs, but in like the professional world, how long does it take to make a program for a hospital like you just used as an example?
Well, to write a hospital program, you'd probably need to learn database programming so that you'd know how to get a record from a database and let them make changes to it and post it back, that kind of stuff. So you'd need to learn how to do that. And then you might want to design screens for it so that they could add data to it and stuff like that. So that's a fairly big project. You'd probably actually have more than one person working on it, be my guess. Once you get really good at this stuff, then you can do it. Just like there are indie game developers where one person is writing a game rather than a team of 100 or 200 people, like probably are working on Warcraft or League of Legends or whatever. One person can make a game and upload it to PlayStation or whatever, like Super Meat Boy or whatever, but it takes them a long time to write a nice looking game, whereas a team could probably write it more quickly. But sometimes it's cool to play something that was written by one person, a very concise game rather than some mega Call of Duty style game. The best way to become a programmer is just to become a programmer. What do I mean by that? To write programs on your own time. If you take a class and you do all the assignments and you walk away from it, then in a couple of years you're going to have forgotten most of what you've learned. It's just a fact of life. You know, when I went to college, at first I thought I was going to be an electrical engineer, so I took classes in that, and I remember 10% of what I learned. Of course, that was 20, 30 years ago, but you get the idea. To become a programmer, you do programming on your own time. And then you can use that as evidence that you're a good programmer when you go job interviewing. So if you download the Pygame library and type in some examples of creating like Space Invader style games or Mario style games or stuff like that with Pygame, then you could think of your own game. You know, I'm going to write some other game, and you could write a Pygame, you know, using a Pygame library. And then you learn another language like C#, and you can get really sophisticated game libraries for C#. What's that one that everybody uses? Unity. Unity is an incredibly powerful game library, and C# is a good language for working with it. You know, and there are Unity games that run on iPads, and, you know, on Windows and stuff like that. So you build up, you take baby steps, and then you become more powerful. And if you're not going to become a professional programmer, these concepts are still good. If you're going to go into cybersecurity or whatever, you're not going to be writing games and, you know, and you know, hospital programs or stuff like that. But the concepts are good. The concepts are good, and it's still worth your time, you know, deciding I'm going to write a program and it's going to do this and that and the other. All right, make a copy of the list. What's next? Cloning lists, that's just what I mentioned. A is equal to 1, 2, 3. B is equal to A colon. I better update my notes to replace that word copy with cloning. To make a copy of the list, aka clone of the list. Lists and for loops. We've done this enough that I'm not going to spend more than a minute looking at the slides for it. For variable and list do a body. I was calling this a value-based for loop. And this is a common way of structuring it, where you call your list something plural with an S at the end, and then you make your value variable a singular. And I don't do that just because I spend 10 minutes wandering around correcting people's S's. People will put an S there and they'll leave that S off. Not because you're dumb, it's just easy to do that. I mean, people do that anyways. I certainly do it. When I'm up here typing code and then I get annoyed at myself because, you know, I use a singular where I should have used a plural or whatever. So if I was going to write this code, I would say friends is equal to Brad and Angelina. Okay. You know, friends is equal to a list of name, and then I would do for V or value in friends, print V. But if you want to be awesome and cool, that's a cool way to do it. Make your list plural and then make your value variable singular. This would print all the numbers divisible by 3, up starting at 0 and going to 19. Why? Because they're ranging their number up to range 20, which is 0 through 19, and then they do that modulus. If the number modulus 3 is equal to 0, meaning that it's evenly divisible by 3, 3 goes into the number with a remainder of 0, then print that number out. And then for fruit in, and here they didn't put the list in its own variable. Instead, they just put the list right there inside the for loop. That's pretty rare. Usually you get your data from somewhere, and then you do the for statement on the variable. That's a weird syntax. I mean, it's actually the exact same syntax. It's just usually you'd put all that stuff in a variable first, and then like fruits. That's weird. Fruit is actually a singular and a plural term, isn't it? Anyways, you know. List parameters. Passing a list as an argument passes a reference to the list, not a copy of it. So if your function starts deleting things from the list or adding things to it, it actually changes the list, which is kind of what you would expect. But yes, you can use a list as a parameter to a module. We could write a function that would print out the elements of the list. Let's do that. Here we have our cute little function. Our cute little list C. We could write a for loop that would print it out, but we could also write a function. Now usually I like to write my functions up at the top rather than put them mixed in with the code, but I'm going to put it here and maybe later I'll cut and paste it, put it at the top. How do you define a module? How do you define a function? What's the first word you put? DEF, and then I'm going to do print L for print list. Parentheses, and I need a variable to pick up that list, a parameter. So I'm just going to make a capital L. Now I need to do something with that list. I could print it out with a for loop, with a for value loop, or for a for range loop. Either way works. You could use a for index loop. So for I in range, len, for I in range, parentheses, len, parentheses, capital L, then 2 close parentheses and a colon. I'm going to print I, comma, by, and also that value at that element. So print I, comma, L subscript I, and then a return statement. Now I feel like printing that list. So print L subscript C. That'll print the colors list. But it's going to print 0 green, 1 blue, 2 yellow, 3 orange, and 4 silver. We're actually going to see the indexes because I told it to print out I as well as that list element. And it's kind of nice to write your own list functions like that so that you don't have to write that dang loop every single time you want to process it. Instead, you can just call the module. That's the advantage of using modules, is that you can reuse your code. And then when you think that you have a cool set of functions, cool set of modules, you can save them in a separate file and do import from your other one, and then just automatically get all that rich module goodness. Let's see if that works though. I want to see if this print module run. Alright, and it did. It printed 0 green, 1 blue, 2 yellow, 3 orange, and 4 silver. Almost time to start talking about appending to an empty list. So I hope that that's real soon on the web page. And by the way, wave your arm if you need typo correction because I haven't been asking. Alrighty. Now when we pass this in, it's a reference to the same list. L is not a copy of C. L is C, just like we were talking about earlier. 2 VIN numbers for the same automobile. So if you make any changes to L, then you have also changed C. If we deleted, something from list L, then it's gone when we print out list C because they're the same one. You repaint your car orange, then you've changed it for both references to it. List methods. Now we're talking. Append. You can't do this with arrays in languages that actually have arrays, unlike Python. You can't create an empty array and then start adding to the end. Why? Because arrays are fixed in length. You create an array of length 5, then it's not going to magically grow to 6, 7, and 8 as you start appending to it. But lists are cool. Lists are not fixed in length. So let's append some new colors to our list. C.append, and let's add, black to our list. C.append, parentheses, violet. C.append, some other color. Somebody name a color. What was that? Blue. All right, we've already got blue, but there's nothing wrong with appending it again. Now let's print L our list again. Print L subscript C. We're going to call our print L module, and we will see that now it's got additional elements tacked onto the end, appended to the end. Let's prove that. I really hope I started the recorder. Yes, okay. So here's what our list looked like at first. It printed out elements 0 through 4. Now we've appended a couple more things to it. Green, blue, yellow, orange, silver, black, violet, and blue. Actually, I'm glad that you suggested blue. Why? Because we're going to probably wind up illustrating something that would change every element, every occurrence of blue to another color. It kind of does a search and replace. So that's a new function. I'm going to go over here and tack that onto our notes as a new function. So list functions. L.append parentheses x. Not square brace, because then it would think that there's some kind of list called append. L.append parentheses x appends x to the end of L. I wonder if that works with strings. I'm going to call s.append and see if that causes an error. S.append, because S is our Darth Vader string. I'm going to add some exclamation points. All right, let's find out if that works. Nope. The string object has no attribute append. All right, that didn't work, so delete. So some of these functions work great with strings and some do not. Maybe we'll make two lists, string functions and list functions. And what would be really awesome is if yours truly made a PowerPoint that had a list of these functions in it so that you could reference it during an exam. I'll do that. Now anybody got syntax errors?
Still working on mine. This is so cool.
What if we don't want to append though? What else might you want to do? You don't want to always stick things onto the end. What else? You have a list, you want to put items in it, but not always at the end.
Add them to the beginning.
Yeah, to the beginning or the middle, right? You're giving somebody a list of directions to Walmart, but you told them you forgot to tell them to turn on 15. Well, at a certain point in the instructions, you're going to want to insert it in the beginning. I mean, insert it in the middle. And I believe it is insert. Let's find out. C.append parentheses 3, comma, not append, insert. 3.insert at position 3, the color gold. And then let's print our list again. Print L subscript C. Yep.
I misspelled it.
All right, and it did put gold into our list. At which index? Well, it's pretty obvious because it's got a 3 there. And it didn't replace it. It changed it. Wait, change and replace are the same thing. It didn't replace it. It added it to the list at that position. So, this added where gold became the new item 3. And then items 3 became 4 and 4 and 5, you know, pushed it all the way down. Can we remove something from a specified position? Say we made a mistake and now we're running out of gold paint. I'll come help you in a sec. Maybe it's C.remove. Let's give that a try. C.remove index 3. Might work. The other thing that we could do is C or DEL C subscript 3. I wonder if that would be better. Let's find out. There is no remove X. Alrighty. My mistake. remove doesn't work by index, it works by value. So remove gold. Remove gold from our list. And by the way, that'll blow up if gold is not in the list. So typically when you call .remove, you check to see if it's in the list first. Now what keyword do we use to check to see if it's in the keyword, if it's in the list first?
Is it an if?
Yeah, if in. So we would do this. If, quote, gold in C colon, remove it. If you don't have that if statement, then it'll blow up when you try to remove it.
The best thing about if functions, it'll only see if it's true, and if it is, that'll perform this process.
Yeah, and if it's not true, it won't call C.remove and we'll be safe. All right, that worked, although I didn't print it out. I'm printing it out over and over and over. I feel like changing my module so that it prints like some dashed lines in there to make our output a little bit more visible. I'm going to scroll back up to the print L module, and I'm just going to print quote dash 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 end quote up at the beginning of it, and then the same thing before our return statement. Now don't indent it, because you don't want it printing it out for every item. You just want it before it returns. And you don't have to do this, but I just added that line and I added that line. Make sure they're indented properly. All right, now I'm happier. I'm seeing little, distinction between my lists. Makes it easier to eyeball the changes. But I didn't print it out after my removal of gold. So one more call to print L parentheses C. And there it goes. The color gold is gone from it. Let's remove blue and see if it takes out one or both of them. So I'm going to do if, quote, blue in C colon, C.remove, quote, blue. My hunch is that it's only going to take out the first. Yep, it left the last one. So we could just keep looping over and over, removing them all. If we wanted to remove them all, we would change that if to a while. While blue is in C, remove blue. That cut them all out. I'm going to copy that one and change it back to an if so that I can add comments that this would remove the first one, whereas this would remove them all.
There's still a blue inside of it.
Pardon me?
There's still a blue in that with the all statement. There's still one left.
Let me come look. So my little comment here is that this removes the first element matching or containing gold. And then I'm going to add the comment to the other one. This removes all the elements with the while loop. Removes all the elements containing blue. Because it's a while loop, it keeps repeating it, continually removes them until the in keyword returns a false rather than a true. So I better go back to my functions list in the nodes and add .remove and .insert if .insert was not already in it. Nope, append is, but insert is not. So L.insert x comma y inserts y at position x. And then let's put these
Hey, Jeff.
examples. Just a sec. Oh, and then remove. L dot remove X removes the value X from the list. Somehow I need to say the first value X. I should say the first element containing X, but it's too much typing. It'd be neat if there was a remove all function. And I wonder if there is, so I'm going to Google it and then I'll come over there, Josiah. Let's see. Remove all from Python list. Okay, that's a sneaky way of doing it. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do it that way either. All right, Stack Overflow is being far too sneaky in the ways that they're trying to do it. Clear is a function that removes all the items of a list. Okay, great. Oh, stop it. All right, forget it. I liked our way of doing it. We could write our own remove all function if we so chose. DEF remove all, and it would just have, whoops, I forgot my parentheses. It would just have this while statement in it. But don't need to do that. All right, I think that we're getting to the point where we have absorbed enough about lists for one day, but I'm going to scroll down a little bit more and see. We better do something with append more than just appending a few things to it. What do I mean by that? We should ask the user for some values. And maybe we should even let them quit. So we're going to do that typical score stuff, you know, enter test scores, because those are the most important things in life. So let's create a list of scores, but it's going to be an empty list because we're going to start appending to it. And now let's have a while loop. And we're going to keep running until the user decides that they want to stop. We might use a sentinel value, -1, meaning a bad, you know, we want to stop adding to our list. So let's do stop is equal, how are we going to do this? Let's do choice is equal to empty string, something like that. And then we'll do while choice not equal to Q. I'm not liking the way this is working out either. How about, what I'm looking for is a variable name that means one score. And yeah, I could just use score with the singular without the S. Anybody think of something else? Pardon? Yeah. Value. I'm just going to run with value. Or I could do test score. Yeah. Test score is equal to 0, but we're going to let them change that, of course. But while test score, you might just copy that word and paste it every time rather than typing it in, since it's 9 characters long. While test score is not equal to -1, or while it's greater than or equal to 0, something like that. Hopefully your teacher isn't such a big jerk he would give you a negative score on a test. So while test score is greater than or equal to 0, we're going to keep looping. So our input statement needs to say something like enter score or -1 to quit, -1 to stop. So test score equals input parentheses, enter score or -1 to stop. Now we've got the score, but we need to convert it to a number, otherwise we can't do any math on it. We've already read it in with the input statement. Let's convert it. Test score equals float. And like I said, if you copy the word test score, save some typing. Now let's make sure that it doesn't match our Sentinel value. So we're going to do our if statement. If test score is greater than or equal to 0. The book would do this in a different way. The book would have a priming read. I really dislike priming reads because that means you have two input statements. You have an input statement above the while loop and then you have one inside it. Either way works. Okay, so we have a score. If test score is greater than or equal to 0, it's a valid score. Or we could do if test score equals, is less than 0, print OK done, that kind of thing. But if test score is greater than or equal to 0, we're going to append it to our list. What is our list name in this case?
Scores?
Yeah, so scores.append that test score. Scores.append test score. And that's enough. I'm just going to put a comment end if there. And then I'm going to put a comment end while there. And then let's call print L on our scores. Print L parentheses scores. So why are we doing it this way? Because this is not a fixed number of scores. We're not going to just create an array of 10 tests and then make them enter 10 scores. Instead, we're going to start with an empty list. I need to add that to my notes along with my list functions. L equals and then brace, empty brace, creates an empty list. Alrighty, I'm going to test it. I'll probably have syntax errors. Enter score, -1 to stop. Okay, 100, 90, 80, 100. They started pulling it off again, 100, 100. And now I'm tired of entering test score, so I'm going to type in -1, and it prints them out, 100, 90, 80, 100, 100, 100. If this was like an 8-hour class per day, then we would take a break and we would write the program so that we ask, if they need to change, if they need to edit any of those test scores. And if they do, they give us a number of which element we want to change and that kind of thing. But we don't have time for that. Let's do some typo correction. Pulling the notes back up on screen. So the program crashed if you accidentally just hit enter. What do I mean by that? We're starting to edit test scores, or enter test scores, and I type in 89, 77, 90, and then I hit enter accidentally and it blows up. Wouldn't it be neat if it didn't? How could we do that? Well, this is a line that's croaking. We might want to check to see if that stuff got a number in it. We could do if test score dot is digit, and we haven't talked about this, but I'm just demonstrating it anyways, and we'll get back to it on Monday. Then tab all that stuff over, and then put an indif there. And it's making a logic, comment indif. I think that's the correct syntax. Let me run it real quickly to make sure that I got the correct syntax. Nope. All right, I'm just going to check to see if test score is empty. If test score not equal to 2 double quotes or 2 single quotes. And I'm going to, oh, I see why it blew up. Okay, I'm not going to take the time to make all the corrections necessary to get that to work. But what we want to do is we would want to validate the data. Meaning that we would want to rule out bad data. We'd want to make sure that it was numeric. All right, I think we've gone far enough today. So I'm going to concoct some list homework or check to see if we have an existing assignment, and then bring back the notes up for anybody who needs to type them. Let's go do that. Heck, I'm just going to create some new homework. Bespoke homework, customized. Okay. So homework. Step A. Create an empty list. Named, I don't know. Books. Then, append the names of 3 books to the list. Print the list out with a loop. Doesn't matter what kind of loop. Alright. B colon. Create an empty list named movies. Ask the user for the name of a movie with input statement. So I'm going to, instead of the word, with an input, and append that to the list of movies. Okay, so instead of making it an empty list named movies, we're going to say create a list named movies with 3 movies in it. And then they're going to input. Alright, now delete, using del, the first element of the movies list. And then D, insert, using movies dot insert, a new movie into the first position in the list. E, using slicing, put the second and third movies into a new list named phase. Not enough? You're going, yeah, actually that's too much, Teach. Alright, I think that's about enough. And let's tack on something else. F, print the length of the movies list. G, print the movies list with a loop. Alrighty. You're going, whoa, Nelly, stop. But you have examples of just about every single thing of this. If you feel like making this a loop so that they can enter more than one movie, Where was that input statement? Okay, I misnumbered. If you feel like making that a loop so that they can enter a whole bunch of movies until they choose to stop, you know, by typing in stop or something, hopefully there's no movie named stop, then you can do that, or you can just ask them for one and append that. All right, that makes sense, guys? Conceptually? If it looks hard, well, you have everything in the notes, and feel free to text me. I'd be happy to help.
Can you pull up the other notes again?
Okay, pardon me?
Can you pull up the other notes again with the...
Yeah. I'll do that. But I'm going to pause the recording or stop the recording. Let's make a Dropbox so that everybody who's actually done typing. Nine. No. J. K. We need K and 9. Okay.
I think you got to make one once.
All right, there's a Dropbox for K. Feel free to upload your Python file/files. I did not mean to be recording during